Hi everyone, Sabbath blessings and a great Sabbath evening to all. Welcome to another Sabbath day. So we thank God for everything that He has given us. In everything, give thanks. That's what we always have to bear in mind. In everything, give thanks. In good times, in bad times, in happiness, in sadness, so whatever the situation may be, our habits should be, like in everything give thanks, and no murmuring, no complaining. Just go through it without any negativity. So let's go ahead and proceed to part 3. So let's go to the part 3 of the study. A little is much. This study is taken from the story where Jesus fed the 5,000. So in the last 2 parts, we have gone through some things that are very important to our spiritual life, our relationship with God, and how we handle certain situation. And in this part, we're going to give a little emphasis on the little lad who had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. But before we talk about him, let us remember that in this story, one of the lessons is that God only needs what you have. He's not going to require us to return or give something that we don't have, or something that is not there. So when He requires from us, He makes sure that we have it. It's not something unfair, like, well, you make me accountable for something that I don't even know. Yeah, like ignorance of the law excuses no one. Well, actually, in the Bible, when you don't know, God will not require you. God will not hold you accountable. What He will hold you accountable is when you refuse to know, when you refuse to understand, when you refuse to study. So when you know something, then comes accountability. He wants to use the things that we already have. He wants to use our talents. Then you say, well, I'm not really that good. Well, if you give it to Him, He's going to increase it. There are so many of us who can testify to that fact, that like before, you don't know how to do this, and then eventually you know how to do it. And that's how God blesses us with what little we have. So this story is also found in the book of Mark. And there is something very notable here that I did not see, or we can't find in John chapter 6. When the day was far spent, it means that when it was like late towards the end of the day, and they were like, well, it's time to eat, right? And they'd be tired or hungry. So the disciples came to Jesus and said, send them away that they may go into the country round about and into the villages and buy themselves bread. So they suggested that the people should now go. Of course, they knew they had nothing to feed them. To go and let them take care of themselves, kind of a thing. But Jesus said, give them food. But Jesus knew there was no food. I mean, He knew that the disciples had nothing to feed them. But of course, He would know that the lad had 5 loaves and 2 fishes. So here you can see that before Philip suggested to get 200 penny worth of bread for them to eat, there was already a suggestion. Let them go and let them find their own food. But Jesus would not allow that, and He was ready to show His miracle working power. So He knew that the disciples had no ability to feed 5,000, but He would test them to see what they would do. So first, the suggestion was, let them go and find their own food. And the next suggestion was Philip saying, do you want us to get 200 penny worth of bread? But in John chapter 6, it says, well, this is not even enough. It's not even going to satisfy and make everyone fill their stomach. So here you can see the humanity of the disciples. Send them and let them take care of themselves. And let them go roundabout. Let them go everywhere. But Jesus was not willing to do that. Right? Because he wanted to show them that whatever you have, I can increase it. Don't worry about how many people are there. Just what little you have, just give it to me and I will increase it. I will show you. So in John chapter 6, we can see that, well, it's not enough. Negativity, right? But God said positivity. Give them to eat. Whatever you have. Oh, I have 5 bread and 2 fishes. So at that time, they only had what the lad or the little boy brought into the crowd. So now let's go to the little boy. This is something very interesting. I remember many things on this. The first thing that comes to my mind is David. The David versus Goliath story that we can also learn from. Well, we are all familiar with that story. So now let's go to the little boy. So in this gathering, there is a record of a little boy who went with them. Who went into the gathering. What was he doing there at a young age? You would think, the mature people, maybe 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, would gather there, right? To learn about Jesus. But guess what? There's a little boy. So what would come to mind is this young man is very interested. He's very interested to listen. So at the end of the story, towards the end of the story, you'll find out that he gave his all. So you can see that this little boy has a spark of spiritual, whatever you call it, spiritual light in him. First, he was interested to follow Jesus, to listen to him. Why? At a young age, very interested. Well, it's not impossible, right? We find in the Bible a young man who was a very help to Apostle Paul. And his name was Timothy. You can see in Timothy's life where his grandmother and his mother taught him of the scriptures. He started his spiritual journey at a young age. Some people started to learn the truth when they're already 50s, 60s. Some started young. Some even are born in the truth. They're born already. When they were born, they're already in the truth. Oh, good for that. Some people learn the truth when they're 70s. And guess what? It's very difficult. It's very, very difficult because from day one and up to their 70 years of age, they learned all these habits, all the lifestyle, all the worldly things, all these things that have become part of their life. So when truth comes, it's very difficult to let it go, and it's a struggle. God understands that, because why? He knows our battles. He knows it. He knows. He's very familiar with each and every one, and and we are blessed that we find this truth at a young age, not when we're 70s, 80s, 90s. It's gonna be rough days, but God has promised power. Even if you're already 70 or 60 or 70, 80, I'll give you the power to overcome this. He promised, young and old, I'll give you the power. But the humanity of the older people, it's just tougher. It's tougher than when you're young. But of course, there are also younger people who are not 100% willing to let go of the things that have been part of their lives that God wanted them to let go. But then again, in general, it's more difficult for the older generation to change rather than when we are young. So we should not wait for the time that, I'm just going to wait 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I'll follow God. No, we have to do it now while we're younger because it's easier. Our mental powers are more, like in a better condition because we're younger. That's why God said, train up a child. He didn't say train up an old person. It's going to be difficult. But yes, the older persons, the older people would also need to be trained and to become like a child. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to enter into the kingdom of God. So you find it in 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 5. When I call to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in thee, which dwell first in thy grandmother Lois and thy mother Eunice, and I am persuaded that in thee also. You see, in the life of Timothy, he was trained as a child. And then later on, he was a very big help to Apostle Paul, doing the work, like being a Levite, was called into the work of the ministry. So you can see that in this little boy, he was very interested at a young age. And it's a big lesson for us, especially to the younger generation. If you look at Ecclesiastes 12, 1 and 2, remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. While the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. We need to remember the Creator while we're young, because it's easier to adapt to things. It's easier to adapt into the truth. You're well able, physically able, mentally. We need to not wait for later. Oh, I'll wait till whenever I reach 20 or 30. We need to remember, like this little boy. And guess what? His interest to follow and listen to Jesus, look what he did. Look what it made him to be like. Yes, he was willing to give his all. And you can see that when he went to this gathering, he brought food. You can see he was very thoughtful. I'm going to go there and I'm sure I'm going to be hungry. So I'm going to bring my own food. Being responsible for himself. So of all the people, he was responsible enough to bring his own food. That's very nice. So when you look at the life of David, this also reminds me of David. Of all the people that was so scared, afraid of the giant. 1 Samuel 17:23. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. 24. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. Whew, everyone gone except for David. Little beats the greatest. In that crowd of people, there is this young boy who was responsible enough to bring something to eat. But first for himself, right? He would not, I'm going to bring 5 loaves of 2 fishes so that I can feed 5,000. I don't think he would think like that. It's more towards, this is my provision, I'm going to be filled up, I'm going to take this. And guess what? Like in the days of David, everybody's afraid, but here I'm a little boy, I'm going to stand in front of this giant. Kind of a thing. It's like similar. And the boy did not refuse to give his all. David did not refuse. I'm going to go in the name of the Lord. I don't care if it's a giant. And I don't care if I'm just a little boy. He gave his all. No fear, just go. And this little boy did not refuse to give his all. It's not like, I'm going to save myself, otherwise I'm going to die or I'm going to starve. Or that kind of Cain attitude. Am I my brother's keeper? Why do I have to care about what you need? Or if you're dying or not? No, not even your enemies, right? Jesus said, when they are hungry, feed them. Right. That's how the mentality should be. Yeah, even to your enemies. But he didn't say you hang out with them. No, he didn't say that. It's going to be trouble. You hang out with them. So it's because, they know the truth. So it's like, am I my brother's keeper kind of a thing. It's not in the mind of the little boy. He didn't say, well, you take this from me, then what am I going to eat? Oh, you just want to take. We should not think like that. Guess what? If God requires you to give and give because he knows you will and you can, do you think he's going to let you go and lack anything? No, I don't believe that. You cannot say, well, I've spent so much, I'm going to stop spending. I gave so much, I'm going to stop giving. Then God's going to stop giving to you. How about that? Unless if you don't have, then you don't have to. Like I said, in this story, you're only required to give what you have. You don't have, there's nothing to give. You see, it's like he will require what you have, not what you don't have. It's also unfair. And God is not like that. He's a just, good, and holy. So in this story, it's like he was not like worried about, well, nothing shall be left. We're going to take this? Andrew, you're going to take this from me? No, because number one, he was already convicted that going to that crowd is going to bless him. He was already positive. He was positive enough to just, okay, I've heard words of this Master, of this Jesus Christ. Why should I doubt about whatever? Just give it. So he gave it all. He didn't say, give me one loaf and half of the fish. Just give it all. Well, how many of us will be willing to give up what little we have in order to save others? If you look at the life of David, he gave up his life. I'm going to face this giant, and I don't care how big he is or how tall he is. In the name of the Lord, I'm going to go. I'm going to take 5 stones. You see, there's a similarity. 5 loaves of bread. He took 5 stones. Well, we would say, well, if David was full of faith, why would he have to take 5 stones? Guess what? He was full of faith, but he was still human. He was to show heaven and earth that he's going to do his part. Took his sling and he took 5 stones. Because if you think about that, if he would just stand there in front of Goliath and God would just strike Goliath with the lightning, he would die too, right? But that would be an easy part for David. I have nothing to do. I'm just gonna show him that I'm brave, and I'm just gonna stand in front of Goliath and just say, in the name of God, you're gonna fall to the ground lifeless. Would he do that? Would God do that? Yeah, he can do that. Why not? But guess what? He has to show that I have to use an instrumentality, and this instrumentality is still human being like you and me. So in the humanity side of David, well, I'll take 5 stones, but guess what? God only needs 1 stone to kill. Did God need 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes to feed 5,000? No. Even if there was 1 loaf of bread and 1 fish, he can multiply it. Or even if it's like half of the fish and half of the loaf of bread. That's how powerful he is. When we're willing to give up what little we have to save others, he's going to bless that. And he's not going to leave us empty-handed. There's going to be leftovers, overflowing. But sometimes we're just like defeated of our worries, our thoughts about tomorrow, and I'm going to be left for want, or I'm going to starve. No, it's not going to happen. We need to trust what he said. He already showed us that it's not going to happen. Mark 4:24. When you're afraid to give because you don't have, I'm not going to have anything for myself. Mark 4:24. And he said unto them, take heed what ye hear. With what measure ye mete, it shall be measured to you, and unto you that hear shall more be given. For he that hath, to him shall be given, and he that hath not, from him shall be taken, even what which he hath. Even that which he hath. Whoa, that's scary right there. What measure we use to give to others is what's going to be rendered back to us. And if we don't have, if we have and we don't give, it shall be taken. We have, it shall be given. And what we don't have, it's gonna be taken from us. What it means is, you have one and you refuse to give it, it's the one that you have will be taken from you. Like the parable of the man who gave talents. The one who hid his talent was removed from him. But the one who multiplied their talents, they're willing to increase it, more were given to them. So if we measure this much, that's how much you give. If you want to be blessed, super blessed, then you can give more. If you don't want to give because you think that, oh, I'm gonna lack anything, I'm gonna starve, what you have will be taken from you. That's very fearful right there. Some are afraid to be left with nothing, so they resort to hoarding. They think, oh, I'm gonna lack, so they stack up, and they pile up their riches. 2 Corinthians 8:15, what does the Bible say? As it is written, he that gathered much had nothing over, and he that had gathered little had no lack. You gather much, you have nothing over. So what are you gonna use the next time? You have nothing, because you have nothing over. You want to hoard your riches. But if you gathered little, because you want to give to others, right? You just have little, you will not lack anything. That's why we can say, I'm going to give my all. Well, what am I going to eat? You think God left you to starve and have nothing for yourself because you give so much with what little you have? No. The Bible will not lie. The Word of God will not lie. And if you refuse to give, what little you have will be taken away. What little the boy had little, it was returned to abundance, multiplied. But if God requires us to give and we refuse because you have second thoughts, oh, I'm gonna be homeless, or I'm gonna be this, guess what? Whatever you have that you refuse to give, it's gonna be removed from you. Because God will say, you're a slothful, unfaithful servant. So let us fight the thought that sometimes, like, you think you have nothing left over because you've given so much, or something like that. God has given us enough proof that if we can, when we have it, even if it's little, it's going to be turned to abundance. Look what Jesus did. He gave his life for you and me, and look how it resulted. A church, his wonderful church, full of fallen human beings who are ridiculed, mocked, evil spoken, accused and stuff. Because of course we're fallen human beings. And he's gonna have first fruits of harvest. 144,000 who will live, surpass death. How wonderful is that? Just because of one life. His one life, his all. He gave it all to save us all. It's like this little boy. He gave his all to save the 5,000. Just like David, he gave his all. He was not afraid to save the camp of Israel. So what little we have, Jesus is in it. 100%. It's going to increase. It's not just going to bless you, it's going to bless everyone. So there are other stories too. The widow with 2 mites, or the widow that fed Elijah. That's very, very nice. Maybe we can talk about that next time. These are very inspiring stories in the Bible that remind us that with God, there is nothing impossible. He requires a little faith, and he's going to increase it. Increase. Zero faith, you can't work with that. That's dead. He requires a little, he can increase it. And then it will become great and great and great. And God bless us all. And have a great Sabbath day. Bye.